中、日本食スーパーのフードコーナーで友達2人とお寿司とか食べてます。うちの旦那さんはネイティブなアメリカンなので、ちょっとこれからジュライフォースで4日間仕事休みなんだそうで、英語のレッスンに協力してもらおうと思ってます。楽しみにエンジョイ。
全部スタートで
Yes,
最初からね。はい。
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
I'm Fabio. I'm born in Chicago. I'm teaching English from my house. And I'm going to read this book, and starting with Meet Kamala Harris.
Okay, let's start.
Hi. Ja. Meet Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has always been for the people. As a lawyer, an attorney general, a U.S. senator, and now the vice president of the United States, her whole life has been dedicated to working for justice. Okay. While she was fighting for others, Kamala also broke down several barriers for many different groups of people. She is the first Black American and South Asian American vice president. She's also the first woman vice president. But she won't be the last. In everything she's done, Kamala has worked to make sure that other people have equal access to opportunities and justice. Kamala always knew that the world was bigger than her. As a young child, she traveled to her parents' home countries, Jamaica and India. She even lived in Canada. Throughout her travels, Kamala was always interested in ways that people were fighting for fairness. She knew that she wanted to do something to help. That drive led her to the lawyer, a senator, and ultimately the vice president. Her story is still unfolding. What will she do next? Kamala's World, next chapter. Kamala Devi Harris was born in Oakland, California on October 20th, 1964. Her parents were both immigrants. They came to the United States from other countries so that they could study at college. Kamala's father, Donald Harris, came from Jamaica to study economics. And her mother, Shimala Gopalan, came from India to study science. In the 1960s, the world was changing. College students all over the country were taking part in the fight for civil rights. Black and white college students were riding buses together into the segregated South and sitting at lunch counters in peaceful protest. These actions helped the laws of segregation, which became black and white people separated. Next page. Here's a quote I will read now. My mother had a saying, Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last. Donald and Shamala met on their college campus while they were fighting for justice. They got married in 1963. That was the same year Martin Luther King Jr. made his famous I Have a Dream speech. A year later, Kamala was born. Kamala, pronounced Komala, means lotus flower in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is an ancient language of India and is believed to be the oldest language in the world. The lotus flower is an important symbol in Indian culture. The beautiful flower appears to float on water, even though it is rooted firmly in the mud below. Kamala became interested in civil rights and the fight for justice early on. She often attended protest marches with her parents. She would watch the sea of protesters from her stroller. Along with her parents, she would follow the protesters and raise her fist. Power to the people. When? In 1962, Kamala's parents met at college. In 1963, Kamala's parents were married. And in 1964, Kamala is born. Next page. We will begin chapter 2, the early years. Growing up, Kamala's early years in California were happy and carefree. Her sister Maya was born in 1967, and their house was filled with music and food. Education was also very important to the Harris family. Both of Kamala's parents spent a lot of time studying, and books were everywhere. Kamala's dad taught classes, and her mother worked at a lab. She was looking for a cure for cancer. The family liked to take trips together too. Kamala got to see her dad's family in Jamaica and she visited her mother's family in India. Kamala learned that fighting for justice ran in the family. Her grandfather fought for the freedom of Indian people. For many generations, India was ruled by Britain, but Indian people wanted to be free. In 1947, India gained independence. Kamala's grandfather would tell her stories about the fight for freedom for a while. Next page. They walked on the beach. How important it was to fight for democracy. When Kamala was 7, her father got a job at the University of Wisconsin. He was going to move away to teach. This was hard on the marriage, and eventually Kamala's parents divorced. Kamala remembered that the only thing her parents argued about when they divorced was who got all the books. Kamala and Maya would see their father on weekends in the summer. During the rest of the time, they lived with their mother. They went with their protests, and their house was always filled with interesting people who talked about making the world a better place. Finding her way. Kamala was always a warrior for justice. Before she was born, school had been segregated. Black and white children did not go to school together, but the civil rights movement changed the laws. One way to bring different children together was to bus them all to the same school. So every day, when Kamala went to school, she got into a big yellow bus that took her to the out of her neighborhood and across town. This was called integration. Kamala didn't really know what the word at the time. All she knew was that her school was made up of different friends who spoke different languages. She loved it. So when her mother, next page, decided to move to Canada to take a new job, Kamala and Maya were disappointed. The city of Montreal was far away, and it was cold. They would be leaving the warm weather of California for a snowy winter wonderland. Also, people in Montreal spoke French. Could her lowest flower survive in the cold? Next page. Kamala did. She even staged her first protest in Montreal. Kamala learned that the children were allowed to play on the lawn in front of her parents' apartment, and it didn't seem fair. Kamala and Maya marched in the protest. Eventually, the building manager changed the rules. The children were free to play on the lawn. Kamala's first protest was a success. Next page. Jumping in a thinking tank. Kamala liked the life in Canada, but she missed America. That's why when she graduated from high school, she decided to return to the United States to go to college. She enrolled at Harvard University in Washington, D.C. When Kamala's sister, Maya, was born in 1967. In 1972, Kamala's parents get divorced. In 1977, Kamala moved to Montreal in Canada. And in 1982, Kamala attended Harvard University. We will begin Chapter 3, Kamala the Lawyer. A new career. Howard University is a historically black school in Washington, D.C. Many famous civil rights leaders were there, including Thurgood Marshall, a Supreme Court justice. It seemed like the perfect place for Kamala. She made a lot of friends, and she also worked hard. Kamala studied how the government worked and continued to lead protests. One summer, she attended with a senior and learned that it meant to work in a public office and fight for justice. After she graduated, Kamala went back to California to study law. She attended the University of California, Washington's College of the Law, in Berkeley. There they decided to become a prosecutor. A prosecutor is a lawyer who proves that someone is guilty. Kamala chose to be this kind of lawyer because she saw a lot of injustice around her. As a prosecutor, she can make sure that people who committed crimes are held responsible. After law school, Kamala took the bar exam, and that's the test that allows a person to practice law. Kamala didn't pass. She was devastated, but she didn't give up. Instead, she studied hard and took the test again. The second time, she passed. Finally, Kamala could follow her dreams. Next page. Kamala's first job was as a deputy district attorney in Alameda, a city next to Oakland where she was raised. Later, she worked in different offices in California, gaining experience helping people. Then she took a job in an office that worked on behalf of families and children. There, Kamala could not only help individual families, but she could also work on policies or laws and rules that could help her families all over the state. Life in San Francisco. In San Francisco, Kamala led the Children's Services Division of City Hall's In that role, she brought charges against people who committed crimes that hurt children. Kamala worked to get families into safe spaces and keep them from harm. It was important to work, and Kamala knew that it was really all that really mattered. Protecting innocent people was just one part of her job. Another part of her job was helping change policies and laws so that people always had an access to safety and fairness. Kamala began to make recommendations for more funding so she could help even more families. Kamala knew what she wanted to do, so she decided to run for the office of district attorney. Next page. I'll be reading a quote that says, "Anyone who claims to be a leader must speak like a leader." That means speaking with integrity and truth. A district attorney, or a DA, is the lead prosecutor of a country. The DA manages other lawyers and is a person who decides what cases to prosecute. The lawyers and the DA are not elected to the office, but the DA is. To be the district attorney of San Francisco, Kamala would have to run a political campaign to get votes. I'll begin chapter 4, Working for Justice. Running for office. Kamala didn't have a lot of money or experience running a campaign, but she knew that in order to be elected as district attorney, she had to go out and meet people in the community. Before they could support her, people had to know who she was and what she stood for. Kamala's mother helped her get the word out. Together, they set it up in an ironing board in front of the local supermarket and other public areas. The ironing board made the perfect standing desk. They taped up posters and spoke to people about Kamala's plans. Kamala would meet and greet people who went in and out of the store. She asked questions so she could find out what was important to the community. People asked her questions too. They wanted to know more about her life. Other people were running for the office too. The first round of elections ended in a tie. Kamala made it to the top 2 candidates. Then there was a second election. She won. Kamala celebrated with her win with her family. She was now the first woman to become the DA in San Francisco. Her first days on the job weren't easy. The office was a mess. One of the first things Kamala did was paint the walls. She always believed no problem was too small to fix. Now the office was ready for the important work that needed to be done. Next page. An important job. Kamala got to work. She met families who suffered because of gang violence. She pushed for laws and made sure guilty people went to jail and stayed there. But Kamala knew that some people were changed with crimes didn't need to be punished. Instead, they needed help. Kamala understood that one bad choice can lead to a good person to a challenging situation. She looked for ways to stop the cycles that kept people from getting ahead. Not everyone agreed with her approach. Kamala decided that the community needed programs to help people who had made mistakes get their lives back on track. In fact, she called her program Back on Track. Then Kamala met a woman named Latifa Salman. Latifa was made bad decisions as a young woman, but she was able to get help and change her life. Then she began to make different choices. She even won an award for a program she started to help girls in tough situations. Kamala asked Latifa to help with Back on Track, and Latifa agreed. Now Latifa and Kamala were helping women all around the city get a fresh start. Next page. Kamala continued to set her sights high. She decided to run for the California Attorney General office. An Attorney General is the head of lawyers of a state or even a county. Kamala began another campaign to win votes, but this time her mother couldn't help. Shamala was sick. Then, in 2009, her mother died from cancer. Kamala knew that she had to honor her mother's memories by working hard to help others. So, that's what she continued to do. Next, I'll be beginning chapter 5, Breaking Barriers. A new role. On January 3rd, 2011, Kamala became the first woman in California history to be elected to be the Attorney's General Officer. She was also the first Black woman to hold that position, as well as the first South Asian woman. That's a lot of firsts. But Kamala didn't focus on that. Instead, she focused on doing good. As the Attorney General, Kamala was the top lawyer in the whole state. Her job was to make sure that every voice in California mattered. People in California were having a hard time. Some people were losing their homes because they had bad loans. Several years earlier, the banks began to make risky loans that the people wouldn't be able to pay back. The people needed help. Kamala started investigations. She wanted to hold the banks responsible. California is a big state with a lot of economic power. Kamala used their power to negotiate with the country's 5 biggest banks. They made sure the banks would help people keep their homes. In 2012, Kamala announced an agreement with the biggest technology company to be more open about how they use people's privacy information. She also worked to help prison inmates. Instead of just throwing people in jail, Kamala fought to get them education and job training. She had other priorities like protecting the environment. Kamala won huge settlements against the oil companies that, next page, caused oil spills. Kamala became well known throughout all of California. Then, in 2012, Kamala was asked to speak at the Democratic National Convention in North Carolina. At a convention, a political party chooses who will be the candidate for the presidential election. In 2012, the Democrats were standing behind Barack Obama. He was running for a second term as president. When Kamala took the stage, people across the country saw a rising star. People began to learn about her, go to work, and wanted to know more about her. Moving up. Kamala had a lot going on and was working all the time. Her friends thought she needed to have more fun, so they introduced her to a lawyer named Doug Emfroth. Kamala and Doug got along, but Kamala was worried. Doug had 2 children named Cole and Ella. Would they like her? They did. In 2014, Kamala and Doug got married. They wanted to make sure that their wedding included traditions from both their cultures. Doug stomped on a glass as part of Jewish culture. Kamala put flowers around his neck as part of her Indian culture. Next page. The children even got involved. They came up with the perfect name for their new stepmom, Momala. Balancing life and work was challenging. Kamala became a new family tradition of having Sunday dinners at home together. She had more responsibility at work now, so she had to work hard to keep her family traditions alive. I'll be reading her quote that says, "What I want young women and girls to know is, you are powerful and your voice matters." Kamala thought about how she could do more for her community. As a lawyer, she brought people to justice, but she wondered how she could help and change laws to stop injustice before they happened. There in 2015, Barbara Boxer, one of California's senators, announced that she would be running for re-election. Kamala thought about it. As a senator, she would be able to do more for her state. She would be able to help change laws, and it would be more work, but it would be worth it. Many people believed Kamala would be a good senator, and they spoke up for her. First, the state's governor, Jerry Brown, endorsed her. Then President Obama and Vice President, next page, Joe Biden gave her the thumbs up. In November 2016, the election became the Californians cast their votes. Kamala won. In her victory speech, Kamala talked about fighting for the rights and equality of all people. She thought about her mother and the work she had done. Kamala felt she was walking in her footsteps. She was using her voice to help others. We'll begin Chapter 6, Senator Harris. Working in Washington. Though senators represent their states, they spend most of their time in Washington, D.C., working with others in the government. That's where they pass new laws. Now that there was a senator, Kamala didn't see her family as often. Still, she tried to make it home for Sunday dinner. She wanted to stay connected to her family and to the community she worked for. In Washington, Kamala worked on a lot of the same issues she fought for in California. Only now she was able to create laws that could help people. She continued to work for the families. She helped pass laws that could help immigrants, children find safe places to live. And she worked hard to protect the environment. Every year, wildfires burn homes in California. Scientists say this changes of the environment will make the fires worse. Kamala worked to help people understand these issues, so laws could be passed to make things better. Kamala was working hard at making important changes to the laws. Still, she thought, what more could I do? And then she decided one more thing. She could run for president. Next page. Running for president. On January 21st, 2019, Kamala announced on TV that she would be running to become the President of the United States. The day was significant because she was Martin Luther King Jr.'s day. She used the slogan, "For the people." The first time Kamala set foot in the courtroom, she stood up and proudly said to the judge, "Kamala Harris, for the people." Kamala always stood up to protect for the rights of the people. People knew she was on their side. Kamala's presidential campaign was much harder than her earlier ones in California. She needed more than an ironing board desk. She needed offices. Naturally, she chose Oakland, California, one of her many campaign offices. The other thing she needed was money, so she could afford to get her message out. Kamala traveled all around the country. She spoke at different events and went on TV. She told people about her work and what she would do if she became president. Then it was time for the presidential debates. That's when all the candidates running for office get together to talk about to compare their plans. The debates help people decide who to vote for. Kamala did well in the debates and defended her position, but on December 3rd, 2019, she decided to end her campaign. Next page. Many other candidates were also in the race, and it was hard for Kamala to stand out. When she stepped aside, it marked the end of the journey and started something else. Another candidate, former President Joe Biden, Vice President Joe Biden, went to win on the nominees. He would then be the Democratic candidate for president. But Joe saw something special in Kamala, so he asked Kamala to join him. If he won, she would be the vice president. Chapter 7, Becoming Vice President. Many firsts. On August 19, 2020, Kamala prepared to take the stage. Once again, she was going to speak at the Democratic National Convention, but things were different this time. Now she was a candidate for vice president. Also, most of the seats would be empty. A deadly virus called COVID-19 had spread across the country and the world. People were getting sick. In order to stay healthy, people wore masks and stayed apart. The convention would help take place in Wisconsin, but people had to watch it at home on TV to make sure everyone stayed safe. Kamala used to campaign, but not like this. Before, she would shake hands and give hugs, and she went around meeting new people. Now she had to stay apart. When election day came in November, many people didn't want to go out and vote in person. They didn't want to risk getting sick. Instead, they mailed their ballots. Usually a winner is announced on election night or early the next day, after all the votes are counted. Because so many people voted by mail, some people worried that not all votes would be counted. The officers knew they wouldn't be able to count all the votes in one night. They knew it might take several days, and they couldn't rush. They didn't want to make any mistakes. Finally, after 4 long days, it was official. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would be the new president and vice president of the United States. Kamala wore a white suit when she made her acceptance speech on Saturday, November 7, 2020. Her white suit was a symbol of all the women before her who had fought for the rights to vote. Remembering those women, Kamala said, "I stand on their shoulders." Next page. Kamala Harris makes history as the first woman vice president of the United States. She is also the first Jamaican American and the first Indian American to hold that office. Kamala talked about all the other firsts in her speech. While I may be the first woman in this office, Kamala said, I will not be the last, because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities. Next page. On January 20th, 2021, Kamala was sworn in as vice president, standing in front of a Capitol building in Washington, D.C. With Doug at her side, she held up her rights and swore to support the defender of the Constitution of the United States. Joe Biden made the same promise. A few hours later, Kamala gave her first speech as vice president. With the Washington Monument behind her, she spoke of American aspiration, calling Americans bold, fearless, and ambitious. They are the same traits that Kamala's mother inspired in her. Next page. Kamala had reached the next stage in the journey. She began as a little girl in a stroller, attending protests with her parents. As a child, Kamala watched her parents fight for justice. Then she followed in their footsteps throughout her career. She kept pushing to make sure that people that had helped her they needed. As a lawyer, she fought to protect people's rights. I'll be reading a quote that says, "And to the children of our country, regardless of our gender, our country has set us a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourself in a way that others might not see you, simply because they've never seen it before, and we will never applaud you every step of the way." As a senator, they fought to create laws that would protect people. What will she do? Her legacy as vice president will become a writer. Next page. Chapter 8. So, who is Kamala Harris?
Okay, okay, okay.
終わった。
Yeah, thank you.
は
Yeah,
い。
you are so talented.
いやいや、全然。ちょっと、ね、そうね。
Very good. What do you think? How's the impression? How's your personal opinion of Kamala?
カマラ、よくわかんないね。なんかちょっとだけね、なんかちっちゃい話、ちょっとちっちゃいストーリーだけね、なんか結婚した。そして子供いったね。そしてちょっと早いだからね、あまり知らないけど、ちょっといい人多分だね。なんか、なんか she has good ambitions. いつもこのストーリーでね、なんついつも ambition 言ってるだから、多分いい人ね。なんか、そして、とっても頑張り屋と思うね。なんか、always working, always fighting, and even though she has a family, なんか家族いるけど、いつも仕事が大事だから、ね、多分、always really hard working for what she wants.
Oh, nice.